When a three-time Daytona 500 champion sits in a room with NASCAR's top executives and helps design a brand new rules package, you know something big is coming. And on Wednesday, it arrived. Denny, Hamlin, and NASCAR just rewrote the Superspeedway rulebook, and the changes debut with only 6 races left before the playoff field is locked in. This is not a minor adjustment buried in a technical bulletin. This is a fundamental rewrite of how stock cars will race at the most famous track in American motorsports. And it lands at the single most pressure-packed regular season race of the entire year, the event that decides which 16 drivers advance to the 2026 chase for the championship. So the question hanging over the entire garage right now is simple. Is this a genius fix for a problem that has plagued superspeedway racing for years, or is this a reckless gamble dropped in at the worst possible time? Let us break down everything, because the details here matter enormously. Start with what actually changed, because the numbers tell the story. The rear spoiler on the next generation car is being cut from 7 inches down to 4 inches. That is the exact same spoiler height used on intermediate tracks like Kansas Speedway and Charlotte Motor Speedway. Alongside the shorter spoiler, teams will run wide splitter stuffers, which are also part of the current intermediate package. To offset the downforce lost from that smaller spoiler, horsepower is dropping as well. The engine-tapered spacer is being reduced to 27/32 of an inch, which brings output down from roughly 510 horsepower to 465 horsepower. NASCAR is also introducing new spoiler braces, and the spoiler deflection device has been redesigned to accommodate the 4-inch spoiler. One thing that is not changing is safety. All of the current safety equipment, including the A post flap, remains exactly the same as the existing superspeedway package. Now here is what NASCAR expects those changes to produce on the racetrack. Officials project single car speeds to be approximately 2 to 3 miles per hour faster than current qualifying speeds. Cars running together in a pack, however, are expected to run about the same speeds as before. That distinction is intentional and it is critical. NASCAR is not trying to make the pack faster, it is trying to make the racing better. And the most important number in the entire announcement might be this one. NASCAR's dynamic passing maneuver computational fluid dynamics modeling indicates that completing a pass with a 5-mile-per-hour run on another car is significantly more likely with the new package. In plain language, when a driver builds momentum and pulls out of line, the math now says that moves should actually work. The package makes its debut at the Coke Zero Sugar 400 at Daytona International Speedway on August 29, the regular season finale that locks in the 16-driver playoff grid the moment the checkered flag falls. Coverage begins at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC, HBO Max, Motor Racing Network Radio, and SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. But here is the key caveat. Right now, this update applies to the Cup Series race at Daytona only. There is one more superspeedway race on the calendar, at Talladega Superspeedway on October 25 during the chase itself. According to reporting, the revised specifications are expected to run at Talladega as well, unless NASCAR sees something unintended through the Daytona event. In other words, Daytona is the audition. Talladega is the callback. And any determination for future superspeedway races beyond that will be confirmed at a later date. So why did NASCAR do this? To understand the answer, you have to understand what superspeedway racing has actually become. For years, races at Daytona and Talladega have developed a reputation, and not always a good one. Fans call it fuel mileage chess. Drivers ride around in formation, save gas, save equipment, and wait to make one move in the final 10 laps. It is calculated. It is strategic. And for a large portion of the fan base, it is boring. The drivers themselves have not been shy about it either, because the strategy forces them to race well below 100% for most of the event. But here is the part most casual fans miss. The real culprit is not fuel. It is drag. The current package creates so much aerodynamic resistance that the leader of the pack ends up running at what amounts to terminal velocity. Every car behind can close the gap easily, but almost nobody can actually complete a pass. Veteran crew chief and analyst Steve Letarte explained the problem perfectly. When I watch superspeedway racing currently, it seems like the leader is basically at terminal velocity, Letarte said. It's very easy to get a run on the leader and very hard to do anything with it. You pull out of line, you hit this wall of air, and for that reason they're just kind of stuck too wide around the bottom. That wall of air is the villain of this entire story. A driver builds a run, pulls out of line to attack, slams into that invisible barrier, loses momentum, and drops backward through the field. So nobody pulls out of line. Everybody rides in place. And the race turns into a 2x2 parade decided by track position and pit strategy. Denny Hamlin, driver of the number 11 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota and co-owner of 2311 Racing, described exactly what that looks like from inside the cockpit. I can tell you from the driver's seat what happens for us is that we spend the entire race fuel mileage saving all for that last pit stop, Hamlin said. We basically know you have to be in the top 4 inside that last fuel window unless there's a big wreck to have a shot at winning. I mean, if you come out 10th, you are log jammed, you're not going anywhere. Think about what that admission means. One of the best superspeedway racers in history is telling you that the outcome at Daytona is largely decided by pit sequence math rather than driving skill. If you exit that final pit stop outside the top 4, your race is essentially over no matter how fast your car is or how talented you are behind the wheel. So what is the target? What does good superspeedway racing actually look like in NASCAR's eyes? The answer, according to Hamlin, is Atlanta. What we're essentially trying to recreate is Atlanta at Daytona and Talladega, Hamlin said on NASCAR's Inside the Race program. It happens organically at Atlanta, the space between the cars, because the cars themselves are grip limited. And the fuel mileage really doesn't happen because you have to be on offense constantly. If you watch the pack, there is no saving. Guys are dicing it up the entire race. At Echo Park Speedway near Atlanta, a 1.5-mile track, the 7-inch spoiler works beautifully because the surface and banking naturally spread the field out. Cars slide around, grip becomes the limiting factor, and drivers are forced into constant offense from the opening lap. The 2.5-mile Daytona layout and the 2.66-mile Talladega layout offer far fewer passing opportunities with that same high-drag configuration. Hamlin pointed to the high quality of racing in Sunday night's event at Echo Park Speedway as the proof of concept, and he put a specific figure on what the new package should deliver. This is our first bite of the apple at this, so what I believe is that from the numbers that I've seen, it's going to be roughly a 33% gain in the right direction. A 33% improvement in a driver's ability to pull out of line and make something happen. That is not a marginal tweak. That is a meaningful shift in the fundamental physics of the draft. Now let us talk about who actually built this, because the credibility of the people involved tells you how seriously NASCAR is taking the problem. This was not some executive memo handed down from a boardroom. A working group inside NASCAR has been discussing potential changes to the superspeedway rules since the spring Talladega race. Denny Hamlin, a 3-time Daytona 500 champion and active team co-owner, sat in that room. So did John Probst, the president of NASCAR Event Management. And pushing the entire effort forward from the top was NASCAR's new chief executive officer, Steve O'Donnell. "We want to react quickly," Probst said. "You know, Steve O'Donnell, our new CEO, is on us all the time to get the feedback and react on the feedback as quick as we can." Probst was also refreshingly honest about how the group landed on this specific package. They did not swing for the fences. They picked the biggest change available with the lowest risk attached. "We made changes that we felt had the highest potential to make a big change, but with the lowest risk as well," Probst explained. "Like, we didn't pull every lever that we could because some of those would frankly require us to get 15 cars down to Daytona and try some more radical stuff. We're not against doing that, but that certainly would affect the timing in which you unroll that level of a change for." He added, "I feel like everybody in there brought their opinion and provided really good feedback." And I think that where we landed is the biggest change we feel like we can make without doing a full-blown test. Probst also identified exactly which piece of driver feedback shifted the group's focus. One was the fuel mileage racing that was going on, and then also the inability for cars to pull out and pass, he said, noting that the group eventually realized the passing problem was the root cause worth attacking, because drivers felt they needed track position on the final restart just to have a chance to win. And this move fits a clear pattern. Since the next generation car debuted, NASCAR has shown a repeated willingness to fine-tune the package track type by track type. A separate change was already made to stage lengths at Talladega in the spring in an effort to reduce the incentive to save fuel. Horsepower adjustments were made on short tracks and road courses to improve the racing there. As Hamlin put it, they're not afraid to just keep fine-tuning it and getting it good at all these racetracks. The intermediate tracks, in his words, speak for themselves. The superspeedways were simply the next item on the list. But now we arrive at the risk. And the risk here is genuinely substantial. There will be no test session before the Daytona race. There will be no practice that weekend either, because the norm on superspeedway weekends is qualifying only. Read that again. The first time any Cup Series driver experiences this package in the draft will be when the green flag flies in the regular season finale. Every team still fighting for a playoff berth has to adapt to a fundamentally different car in real time, with a postseason spot hanging in the balance. Superspeedway racing is already the most unpredictable, highest rec style of competition in the entire sport. Reducing drag and increasing single car speed even by a small margin adds energy to the equation. More aggressive racing combined with higher closing speeds is a formula that can absolutely produce more chaos. And the nightmare scenario writes itself. A chain reaction wreck triggered by an unfamiliar aerodynamic behavior nobody could have practiced for eliminates a playoff contender through no fault of their own in the very race that sets the field. Steve Letarte, however, makes a compelling counter-argument about the timing, and it deserves a fair hearing. You have to remember, there's no more win and you're in, Letarte said. The chase is about accumulating points. You've had 25 other races to score enough points to go down there with the unknown of what this race is going to be. We have a speedway race in the chase that I think will be tough to then try something brand new. So I actually believe that this is the correct cycle. I think Daytona in August becomes a great testbed for then the Great American Race in February. His logic is straightforward. Because the season opens with the Daytona 500, the biggest race of the year, the rules cycle for superspeedways cannot follow the normal winter development calendar. Testing the package in August, when drivers have already had 25 races to bank points, is far safer than debuting it cold at the Daytona 500 or during the chase race at Talladega. Under this view, August 29 is not reckless timing, it is the only responsible window on the calendar. So where does this leave us? Two very different futures are on the table. In the best-case scenario, the new package works almost exactly as designed. Drivers pull out of line with confidence, runs actually convert into completed passes, fuel-saving fades from a race-defining strategy into a footnote, and the racing at Daytona starts to resemble the constant offense fans saw at Atlanta. If that happens, expect this package to run at Talladega in October and become the new superspeedway standard heading into 2027, including the Daytona 500 in February. In the worst-case scenario, the reduced drag creates unpredictable runs in the draft, closing rates catch drivers off guard, a chain reaction wreck takes out multiple playoff hopefuls, and NASCAR spends the following weeks defending the decision to introduce an untested package at the most consequential moment of the regular season. Even the architects of the change are keeping their expectations measured. Probst refused to promise that fuel-saving strategy would disappear entirely. I don't want to make bold claims. I think this should mitigate it for sure, he said. The fuel mileage thing is a tool in their toolbox now that I don't think you'll ever get rid of. I do think that now that they should be able to get out and pass each other, that will certainly mitigate it. It won't eliminate it, but it should certainly take it from a hot topic in the race to something that is just a mention. That is the honest framing. Fuel strategy will always exist in professional racing. The goal is to stop it from being the headline. Either way, one thing is now beyond debate. August 29th, 2026 just became one of the most important non-playoff races on the entire NASCAR calendar. 16 playoff spots, one brand new rules package, 0 practice laps, and a sanctioning body betting that better racing outweighs the unknown. So here is the real question for you. Is this NASCAR finally fixing a problem that has plagued superspeedway racing for years, or is this a risky experiment dropped in at the worst possible time? Drop your prediction in the comments below. Genius move or reckless gamble? And if you want the real breakdown before every playoff race this season, make sure you subscribe, because the most unpredictable stretch of the 2026 season is just getting started.